Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Story. Uh, my name is Daniel Parker, and joining me, of course, as always, is DB Fastbinder, also known as Darth Bobcat.
Hello, everyone.
And of course, those of you who probably don't know me, I am the writer and creator on a comic book called Angels Awakening, currently in fulfillment. People are getting their books every day, and it's an exciting time. I know Bobcat got his.
Sure did. Got my two. I also got the manga style cover.
Yeah, nice. And so yeah, it's a great time. And of course, if you don't follow me on Twitter and you didn't see it, I posted the cover art for my next book titled Guardian Angel. So if follow me on Twitter at Daniel_Parker63, and you'll be able to see it there. Although, actually, let me see if I can pull that up here real quick. While I do that, Bobcat, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, I'm primarily the author of the Confessions of the Magpie Wizard series. Book 3, digital release is going well. Having some issues with spacing because of either Scrivener or Amazon. I cannot tell which. That's going to delay the Book 3 physical release a bit, but I figure sometime in the next 2 weeks that should be up for Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. So making progress there. Book 5 is being planned as we speak, getting very close to being able to start putting, well, not pen to paper, but fingers to keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah, and the link to I forgot to put it in the description, but I put it in the chat. The link to Magpie Wizard, and as well as Second Contact, which is another story that Bobcat wrote. Both of those links are in the chat. If you go and check those out, and don't worry, I'm not going to play the buy my book.
Yeah. But so yep, things are happening over here.
Yeah. So let's see. Here is the cover on Guardian Angel.
Very nice. So I'm guessing that guy on the right there is spoiler.
Yes, spoiler. Yes, if you've read Angels Awakening, you know who he is.
I was wondering until I did, and that's like, okay.
Yeah. So if you haven't read Angels Awakening yet, go read it, and then you'll find out who he is.
Yep.
So yeah. All right. Now getting to the topic of the video, or this stream. We've been thinking about characters that have been in different forms of fiction that we've liked, and at a certain point, particularly if it's a series or a franchise that's been going on for a long time, the whole purpose behind the character kind of fades away, I guess you could say. And the people who are working on it tend to stretch it out to the point where he's just there's very little left of said character.
Right. And you understand why people do this. It's it's like most webcomic people. It's not like they make a webcomic and have it run for 2 years and then make a new webcomic and have it run for 2 years. Most of the time, if they're using this as like a primary or secondary source of income, they're not going to, if you like, imagine if you have a desk job, are you going to cancel your job every 2 years without a guarantee that your next job is going to be better? No. You're gonna want that steady income. Yeah. Even if you've kind of gotten tired of writing and drawing those characters, you're going to go, but I also like food and a roof over my head. Speaking of which, we're having some nice Seattle weather out here. So if you hear the sound of raindrops in the background, I cannot do anything about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Good old Northwest American weather.
Yeah. But back on flow. So, and of course, if you're a company, like if you're hypothetically a company with a mouse as a mascot who buys Star Wars for $4 billion, you didn't buy Star Wars for $4 billion to leave the 6 movies that existed when you bought the franchise alone. You bought that to make more movies, which, totally reasonable that you would want to do that. That $4 billion is expensive to pay off.
Yes.
So, but the trouble is that a lot of times, like I'd say, there's like sort of two categories, or these are the two that occurred to me while I was thinking about this week's topic. You have characters who have a limited purpose in universe, and you have characters with a limited purpose outside of their universe. Because not every character is necessarily suited for ongoing adventures. Like just an example, you'll notice that most romantic comedies do not get sequels.
Yes.
It's not like we have Pride and Prejudice 2 with Extreme Prejudice or anything like that. Because by the nature of it, like, well, she got with Mr. Darcy. Sure, you could write stories about their life together, but that would be kind of outside the point. You'd be making a very different story at that point. Unless, like, oh, Mr. Darcy died of something or other, and oh, she has to find love again.
Yeah, or they have a family, or then it becomes a family drama, and then
right. So you've completely changed genre.
Yeah.
Which means that your existing audience might not be interested in it. They may just want to go for the next romance.
Right.
Now, another example of where the writers give a character a very specific purpose in the story, and then that kind of handcuffs them after that, is to use a somewhat silly example, Knuckles the Echidna in the Sonic series. But DB, why do you always bring up Sonic the Hedgehog examples? Because I have this weird obsession ever since 2006 with every time Sega F's up a game, I have to see how. And it's fun just watching the fans like, this is what we want, Sega. Please just let this happen. And Sega never listens, and they just go, oh, what's that? You want more of like what the last game was like? Okay, we'll just make Sonic Generations again, but worse. No. But the funny thing with Knuckles is that he's introduced in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. His whole thing is, there are the 7 Chaos Emeralds that Sonic uses to go Super Saiyan, and he is the last Echidna and the guardian of the Master Emerald, and he has to spend all of his time on Angel Island making sure that nothing happens to that Master Emerald. That is his job. That is his role in the story. If Knuckles is about, something bad has happened to the Master Emerald. The problem is that, well, people like Knuckles. They're having Idris Elba play him, which is almost as good as being James Bond.
Almost.
Since they're also considering Elba for that role. But people like Knuckles. Like, he's like he's the rival to Sonic. So you have everybody wants to go through and go like, oh, okay. Well, in Sonic Adventure, he's around because the Master Emerald has been shattered into pieces and he has to go collect them. So what happens in Sonic Adventure 2? The Master Emerald has been shattered to pieces and he has to go around and collect them. Okay, why is he in Sonic Extreme or Sonic Riders? Why is he in Sonic Riders racing hoverboards? Well, what about the Master Emerald? F the Master Emerald. This is a racing spin-off. We don't want to have to think about this.
Yeah, don't ask questions. Just consume products and get excited for next product.
And for that matter, just like, look, you're being a killjoy. But the problem is that if what audience members liked about Knuckles was his loner attitude, his sense of purpose, the mystery, like, why is he the last Echidna? If he just is like, I don't know, Bowser in Super Mario Kart, that's a whole other discussion whether it was foolish of Sonic team to give Sonic an ongoing story like that. Heck, even the racing games have weird spin-off stories. Like, there are these birds who are the descendants of genies and or aliens, depending on which game you take as canon. It's just, but still, like, Knuckles is a good example of a character who you give him a specific purpose, and it's like, well, people want to keep having him around, but he can't really be, like, there's no reason for him to be there every time because he has his mission. So, oops, you wrote yourself into a corner. One wonders if that's why they introduced Shadow. because they might have said, well, we want to have like a rival who's like a more direct mirror image of the main character, and also who doesn't have a specific mission. We can just throw him in any situation.
Yeah.
And not have to think about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of a pitfall when you get a character like that, and then they're loved by obviously loved by the fans, and you kind of have to find clever ways to fit him in, and then but then after a while you're just like, why is he here? I don't know. He's just because they want him here. Okay.
Right. Comic books are littered with characters like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like the first category, a character whose base concept in the universe and story is inherently limited.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got characters who, when they invented Batman in the 1930s by ripping off the Shadow, and like there are some receipts. There are some traced panels from the first Batman comics that look apparently which is kind of blew my mind. But so like yes, like you have the Shadow as the inspiration. But when they were writing the first Batman comics, do you think they would have any idea that people would still be printing monthly Batman comics 80 years later? Heck, no.
No. Yeah, no.
So, thankfully, Batman is one of those concepts that is actually really easy to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You can always come up with a new villain. You can always come up with a new thing for the Joker to do. Although you just started having some people like, well, isn't the Batman responsible for all of the Joker's crimes? And it's like, okay, look, in universe, to a degree, you could argue that because Batman just keeps throwing them in Arkham Asylum and they keep getting out of Arkham Asylum, and clearly Arkham Asylum is not doing them any favors, that maybe he is responsible for at least not trying to come up with a better asylum.
Yeah. Well, that darn no-kill policy, like,
Yep. Well, one advantage the Shadow has, he's willing to just blam people down.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Batman. I mean, yeah, it's there's a bit of a lather, rinse, repeat with that with his villains, which I mean, and I would say in that the case of Batman and also like Spider-Man and and I would probably also put Superman, and and by Superman I mean Clark Kent Superman, not the other.
What do you have against Steel? Also, hi, Serena.
Hi, Serena. Yeah, well, it's because he was played by Shaquille O'Neal. That's why. But the thing with those guys is like, I think sometimes it's probably be good to like, do like a hiatus for a little while, and maybe like, give them a little time to cool off for, give people time to like kind of, what the saying, the absence makes the heart grow fonder, maybe give them a little space after a while and then bring them back maybe with a new storyline or something along those lines.
Yeah, the challenge with the challenge for DC Comics in particular is because of the agreements they have with the original creators, they actually can't do that. Right. It's an interesting thing. Like there have been Wonder Woman miniseries that were created specifically to make sure, okay, we don't know how many Wonder Woman comics we're going to be able to ship this year. We'll have this 4-issue miniseries ready to throw in at the tail end of the year, just in case we're under the threshold to keep the rights to the comics from the Marsden estate.
Okay, that makes sense.
Batman and Superman don't have that problem because they're actually popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, I said it.
Yeah.
Comic book fans claim to love Wonder Woman, but they never really buy her.
Yeah, that's true. And congrats, Serena. That's great. You're just 2 away.
Yep, her upcoming comic looks really exciting.
Yeah, it's called Black Rhapsody.
Yep. So follow her on Twitter.
Yes, and if you haven't signed up for her mailing list yet, sign up for that mailing list. So, but yeah, it's with and this is something I've been kind of thinking about for a while with relation to these legacy comic book characters is and at a certain point, I mean, when do you run out of ideas for these characters, and at one point do they do you just hit a wall with them and they're like, okay, yeah, you're just kind of going through the motions at this point?
Yeah, definitely. Like there are some characters where they do hit a wall and they eventually just die out naturally. There are also characters who are kind of their era and take some major retooling to make work again. Like, say, our old pal Luke Cage. Let me go ahead and, for just in case anybody doesn't know what 70s Luke Cage looked like. Come on.
Well, he looked like I will say that it was pretty funny when they had him look like that in the TV show.
I never watched that, but all right. So I'm gonna go ahead and share for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that is such a 70s costume.
Oh yeah.
It's a good costume, but it's a very 70s costume. It's kind of lame that he kind of just shows up in a wife beater and jeans a lot of times. He just because it's like, oh, who's your superhero team? Well, there's Captain America with his distinctive patriotic colors. There's Thor with his winged helmet and long cape and hammer, and then there's that African American gentleman over there who helps us out too.
Yeah.
What's his superhero name? Luke.
Yeah.
Could you call him Power Man again? You just, everyone just knows him as Luke Cage at this point.
Yeah. And I will say in Ultimate Spider-Man, he did have more of a super suit that was okay, but I didn't like the sunglasses.
Yeah, but that's like a character. That's a character specifically made to play off of grindhouse exploitation movies that were popular at the time, just like Iron Fist, just like Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And they went completely dormant for a while, with just occasionally popping up.
Right. And forgive me for not knowing, but I mean, was Daredevil kind of like that, or has Daredevil always been kind of?
Daredevil's kind of interesting. Daredevil started off as I would say that there were two Marvel properties that Stan came up with in the '60s that they kept around for reasons, even though they weren't that popular. The other one being X-Men, that eventually just exploded later, which showed that the power of persistence.
Mm-hmm.
Like X-Men and Daredevil were down to like bi-monthly at one point. X-Men, they actually canceled it because they threw the great Neil Adams at the comic and like, okay, we'll have our best artist and our best writer, and they'll go in there and make the X-Men a household name, and they didn't. Sales just completely ate it. It's like, okay. So they turned them into a reprint book until they came up with the all-new X-Men with Storm and Wolverine and Colossus and all that.
Yeah.
Daredevil was kind of a case of, well, he's kind of like Spider-Man, but with worse villains. And then there was a guy before Frank Miller who kind of turned it more serious, and Frank Miller just went full serious.
Oh yeah.
As he is wont to do.
Yeah. Yes, just read his Batman stuff.
Yeah. Or his Daredevil for that matter.
Or Daredevil.
Yeah,
having Karen Page and turning her into a drug addict.
Oh yeah. I remember if you've watched the Daredevil show on Netflix, I'm sure at least I hope they gave him some sort of check for all that.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah,
Considering he was the artist and the writer for a while.
yeah, yeah, and a lot of the stuff that they used in the show was from his run on Daredevil.
Yep, he invented Bullseye. He's the one who stole Kingpin from being a Spider-Man villain to being a Daredevil villain.
Hmm.
Uh,
And made Karen Page a drug addict.
yes. Uh, uh, Now, it occurs to me that that's actually a counterexample to what we're talking about here. Sometimes just keeping up with a character and you just wait for the right creative mind to hit it, and suddenly you have something new and exciting.
Hmm.
So there can be some advantages to just kind of toughing it out for a while if things aren't going well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I will use an example too of I would say kind of on both ends of that. Um, with NCIS, which I freely admit that was a show I used to watch, religiously for many years. Although I didn't start watching that show until after, like a few years after it premiered, and that's actually when the show started becoming popular. Was right
Hmm.
around year 4 or 5, and yeah, because like the first couple of seasons, it wasn't really that you know big of a show. And a lot of that is it was just it's your standard procedural crime drama, but there's also a lot of like humorous bits in there too. um where a lot of it is just kind of revolves around like the team working together and then putting up having to getting their whatever getting their butts chewed out by Gibbs, who's played by I say Leroy Jethro Gibbs, played by Mark Harmon. And he's this gruff tough well, I shouldn't say former Marine. He's a Marine, but he was a gunnery sergeant, and then he goes and works for NCIS. And his storyline, like it's after a while, his character arc was very compelling because his wife and daughter were killed by a drug cartel, and then he gets revenge on the cartel, and that actually plays up again later in the later seasons. And he's also not and on top of that, he's been married. He has 3 ex-wives, and he's all the drama with that and everything. But after almost 20 years, the show's been on for almost 20 years. Yeah. And Mark Harmon is right at 70 years old. It's like, okay, how much more can we do with this guy? You know?
Right. Make up another ex-wife.
Yeah, make him another. Yeah, yeah. But it's but yeah, but that was a show. Like it started off, didn't start off all that popular. Then it started getting really popular, and now it's kind of waning a lot. And I want to say, actually, I want to say he's the last from the original cast that's still on that show. And but yeah, it's very hard, to keep that up for after a while. And you know and at a certain point you kind of have to say, okay, we've done everything we can. you know it's
We might be leaving money on the table, but maybe we want to leave with some dignity.
Yes. Exactly. But yeah, it's at a certain point, it's very easy to, when you have somebody, a character that people really like and people really enjoy, seeing what happens to them. But then after a while, it's just kind of like, okay, why should I care about this going on now? Okay. Oh, he's, this character I've been watching for years is like, oh, he's still having this issue. Like,
Right. What's that? Batman still isn't over the death of his family.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Superman still hasn't sealed the deal with Lois.
He has or hasn't. I mean, we know he has at least once because Jonathan
Yeah.
Kent exists.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. But he's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. He and Lois are happy, and then they're not happy. Then they are, and then they're not. Like,
Right.
same with Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson. Like,
Yeah, like if Spider-Man had been a 10-year story,
mhm,
the ideal story would like and that's actually like kind of the problem is that people like their stories to have endings, and a lot of serial fiction kind of pretends it has an ending, but it's like at the end, and they lived happily until next issue or next episode.
yeah,
So like if Spider-Man had been a 10-year story, like the ideal story for him would have been, with great power comes great responsibility. He goes out there, fights crime for a while, meets the love of his life, Gwen Stacy, and eventually they settle down, and she has a kid, and he realizes that the greatest responsibility is to that kid. Like that would have been like the lot, to give the kid what Aunt May and Uncle Ben gave him.
hmm
Like that would be like a poignant limited story. Sure, you would have missed out on some exciting stuff like Venom. Um, actually, I'm trying to think if there's anything else after that that's really that noteworthy. I mean,
yeah,
noteworthy and like there's the Clone Saga, but that's not noteworthy for the right reasons. One More
yeah,
Day wasn't noteworthy for the right reasons. I guess it was solid through the '80s, but
yeah.
it's like you could have given him an ending. It actually reminds me of a conversation that I had with my dad when we walked out of the third Nolan Batman movie. And he was like, "Well, I'm just glad that they had Batman and Catwoman get together." I said, "I guess in the back of my head, I couldn't enjoy that, partially because I didn't really like the movie much, but also because in the back of my head, I said, well, I mean, that's just for this universe.
Yeah, yeah,
Assuming you don't go with the theory that Batman died in that nuke and that was Alfred having a hallucination, which apparently is a theory that goes around."
yeah, yeah. I don't buy that theory. And although Nolan is known for having ambiguous endings.
True.
Yeah, but yeah, and to go to another comic book movie universe. I mean, of course, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, that's a that's a group of movies that they're still churning movies out, even though, like, most people have checked out. The people who started watching that with Iron Man 1, they checked out after Avengers Endgame,
Right.
because for a lot of people that was a good endpoint. But they're still churning out these movies, and they're not really building to anything, which I think is kind of a big complaint. And and you kind of have to wonder, like, well, how much longer are they going to keep going with this, with this franchise,
Uh,
with
right. I mean, you had Black Widow, which was a prequel to her death.
Mhm.
Which at this point, I'm sorry if you haven't seen Endgame and you're watching this for some reason, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, yeah, that movie came out over 2 years, almost 3 years ago. Like,
Yep.
yeah,
Sorry. But you you had Shang-Chi, which sounds like it was a reasonable enough Marvel movie.
hmm
And then you had the Eternals, which just sounds like a complete boring train wreck.
yeah, and
Which
long too.
I'll be very curious to see how it does in its second weekend, because like you mentioned, people have checked out. There's enough diehards that it's not going to like die immediately.
Right.
Uh, and then you had 3 TV shows. I watched one and didn't really care for it, and the other two, it's like, eh, eh.
Yeah, I watched two of them, and yeah, they were meh. Like, yeah, WandaVision was meh. Falcon and Winter Soldier was, the first half I thought was actually good. The second half was terrible.
So it averages out to another meh.
Meh. Yeah.
Yeah, which boy, that's something you don't want to hear as your review, because like Richard Meyer will point out, you can if somebody tells you your story is bad, at least it elicits a response.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meh is
Yeah.
oof.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. As as Joe Bob Briggs would say, even if you make something that's really bad, as long as you're entertaining people, they're still going to enjoy it. But if you're boring, that's a killer. You
Right.
don't want to be boring, and
It,
you don't want to have a boring character.
yeah. It's why bad dramas make wonderful comedies, but bad comedies are just nothing.
hmm Yeah, and but uh, but yeah, it's you know, and a lot of this too can kind of be attributed to just not planning, have poor planning. Um, although I think a lot of too is just like you know just I had to say giving the people what they want.
Yeah. Right. Because people would tell, if you ask somebody after Endgame, a lot of people would say, "So what do you want? More Marvel, please. I want to see what happens next." Be- Because you're still on that kind of high. It
hmm
takes now Endgame was a lot of people's end point, but there's still clearly enough interest out there that's worth their while to keep going for it.
Yeah.
But now, what I'm curious about is how much of the box office that we've been seeing from those Marvel movies this year is a result of COVID, and how much is audience apathy. Uh,
Yeah, probably. I would say it's a mixture of both.
Right. Let's because it's like thanks to COVID, they can always go, oh well, this was we technically Shang-Chi isn't profitable yet, but it's a hit by COVID standards,
hmm
and we'll make it up on Disney Plus and Blu-ray, but which probably they will, but
Yeah, they might.
uh,
Yeah.
although the economics of streaming are weird. Like I've heard people talk about it, and it's just weird. Uh,
Yeah.
it really does sound like it sounds like how to put a Ponzi scheme or something when I hear people describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. That's something I always wonder. I've wondered about with Netflix. They keep churning out all these movies and all these shows, and I'm sitting there going, are they really making all of that from however many hundreds of millions of people have Netflix? They're $15 a month. Like I can't imagine that they're able to turn out that much content just from that.
They are borrowed up to the gills, is my understanding.
Uh,
So it's like everything is paid for with borrowed money. Now they're technically profitable most of the time, as far as I understand, but it's not like immensely profitable.
mm,
Uh, but the challenge there is, of course, they may have hit the limit, they may have hit the ceiling of how many people who in the world who want Netflix are willing to pay for Netflix at the current prices. So now it's just a matter of, okay, how do we keep someone subscribed? What are we going to have on our service that will make somebody go, you know what? I'm going to keep giving you that $10 to $15 a month.
mm,
And so it's if you make 150, I'm gonna use some round numbers here. If you make $1 billion, but it costs you 950 million to make enough content to keep them happy, then you're ahead of the game technically.
yeah, not by much, but
Right? Not a
yeah,
great ROI.
yeah, no. But it's yeah, it's so it's to kind of get back to our original point, like when it it's kind of it is important to know when to stop. And I know it, and I know for a lot of for a lot of creators and for a lot of people involved, that's very hard to do. I mean, and when the day comes that I may stop working on a story with Jessica Sawyer, that's going to be a very sad day for me, whenever that day comes. But I know that when it does, it'll be, it's our time. I haven't, I've kind of exhausted what I can do with her, and now it's time to move on to other things.
Definitely. I mean, like my Magpie Wizard series, it has a predefined endpoint. It's a story. It's a story of his redemption from being an evil half devil to begrudgingly becoming a hero. And each part of the story is like a stepwise peg in that, or I guess a step in that ladder to get him to that point. And there's a point where he will be fully. Like he'll of course tell you otherwise because he's very much an unreliable narrator. He's like, no, I didn't turn good. This was just easier. Shut up. You shut up. But like, or I was just faking it the whole time. You didn't fix me.
Yeah. You can't change me.
Yeah, this is just convenient. Shut up.
Yeah.
Go away. But he will hit a point where logically he's basically hit his maturity and he is who he's going to be. And at that point, I could probably still tell stories because the whole series is a memoir being written from the perspective of his end of life. But I don't necessarily know that I'd want to do that because it's just going to drag things out. Like, okay, well, what's his personal revelation this time? He fights demons. Okay, yes, but what does it mean to his character? That he wins?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does he grow? Well, he's in his 40s, so he's probably going to get a little doughy around the middle.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of that, I actually just thought of another character. Ash Williams from the Evil Dead franchise.
Yeah, a friend of mine tried to have me watch the TV show starring him, and it's like,
I finally got around to watching that, and you talk about a character that I didn't think they could do any more with, and they managed to do it. So if you haven't seen the Evil Dead movies, or if you haven't seen Army of Darkness, so Ash Williams, played by the Chin himself, Bruce Campbell, he's basically, it starts out, he's just kind of like a regular guy, and depending on which continuity you want to follow, because the Evil Dead continuity is a little weird. He either goes to a cabin in the woods with his friends, or he goes up to a cabin in the woods with his girlfriend, and they find the Necronomicon, which is the Book of the Dead, and then a bunch of really bad stuff happens. And then at the end of the second movie, he gets sucked into a time vortex, and he's in the Middle Ages. That's Army of Darkness, and then he has to get back. And I would say Army of Darkness is probably the movie where you really get to see more of a different side of Ash. He kind of goes from I would say, like in like the second movie, he was kind of goofy, but he was still somewhat competent. And then, like in Army of Darkness, he just goes completely goofball. Well, not completely goofball, but pretty close to goofball.
You're good, Ash. I'm bad, Ash.
Yeah. and they do that, by the way, in the TV show, once or twice. But there's but the Ash in the TV show is more like the Ash in Army of Darkness, where he's kind of like, he's just kind of just like this, kind of a lovable loser. He works at a like a Walmart type place, and he's just trying to he's just trying to live his life and everything, but he keeps getting caught in this in the fight, this battle between good and evil, and
the only thing he's good at is fighting zombies.
Exactly, yes, and he's got his chainsaw hand and his boomstick, and he and I will say, like in the last season. Okay, so spoilers for the last season. He so like, okay, so like the last couple of seasons, he goes back to his hometown in Michigan, and they call him, the locals call him Ashy Slashy, because the story of what happened in the cabin, kind of at the cabin, goes through the town, and they think he killed all of them, like killed all of his friends and everything, even though it wasn't him. It was the evil, the evil. And so when he goes back to his hometown, he has to confront like all the townspeople there, and he reunites with his dad, who's played by Lee Majors, and and then the other part of it too, in the third season, is he finds out he has a teenage daughter, and so the whole arc in the last season is him, trying to fight and defeat evil while being trying to be a father, even though he's just met his daughter, and and of course his daughter just really hates him and thinks he's either really stupid or evil, and so it's just so you have that whole story arc, but I thought that was really interesting. You take a guy who's like I think, God, I want to say Bruce Campbell now. He's like in his early 60s, but at the time of the show, he's like in his mid 50s. But yeah, like what you were saying with Soren, is just kind of like, even though he's older, you give him some kind of give him some extra motivations and stuff, and then you can actually make something good out of it.
Yep, and like I said, I may find something to continue on at that point, but I have in my head endpoint for like his major character transformation.
Yeah.
Now, so at that point, it might stop being Confessions of the Magpie Wizard, it might become Life of the Magpie Wizard or something like that.
Yeah.
But because it'll be less about his overcoming things, like overcoming his personality per se.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good example of, and that's what you were talking about before. Man, maybe Batman would be better off if they gave him a 5-year breathing period.
Mm-hmm.
Ash got like a 20-year or 20+ year breathing period while they failed to get him into Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a really cool movie.
Would have been nice to actually have a protagonist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe after a brief, after a few year hiatus, you might go back and go,
Mhm.
I haven't written about Soren in a while.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess what the point we're trying to make, I guess, is when you have a character, it's one thing to, if you think you have enough, of a characterization and material to kind of keep it going for a long period of time, but in other cases, you kind of have to look at the character and go, okay, can this character work in the story long term, or are they just kind of like, okay, yeah, we've done everything we can with them, and it's kind of time to give them their swan song, and find some new blood. But of course, if you do that, don't do it the way that Disney did it with Star Wars.
So that brings us to another problem. So we're talking as though it's going to be like the same creative hands holding it the whole way along, but that isn't the case for franchises.
Yeah.
So what really just turns out to happen a lot of the times is like, so you'll have like your first big burst of creativity, and then some franchises are lucky enough to have a second. But eventually, you're going to get out of the hands of really dedicated people and get people who just see it as like a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually like a theory I've had for a while. Like, why do so many writers seem to have active contempt for the characters they're writing for? And it's like, you have the theories out there. It's like, oh, it's an agenda thing or whatever. But imagine that your dream was to go to Hollywood and become a screenwriter or a director, and you get there, you make some connections, you've worked your butt off, maybe you bust tables for a few years while trying to get your screenplay written. They go, Great. We really liked that treatment you did for your own original idea. We're doing a movie based on the Micronauts. we and we really want your script for it. Like, what the hell's a Micronaut? Yeah. Well, here's a Wikipedia page. Here's some resources for you. You might be lucky to get resources, but I say, here's the Wikipedia page. Read about it and see what you can come up with, champ.
Yeah.
But I want to write a story about growing up in Mississippi in the 2000s. That's great. Maybe after a couple of, we got to have our own Micronauts shared universe, right?
Yeah.
But Micronauts I use as an example because they're an 80s toy that I'm told had a great comic book at one point, but I have no effing clue what they are. I
don't either.
I think I've even had what the Micronauts are explained to me, but my brain refuses to absorb it.
Yeah, I've got a few of those too. It's like, I don't, like, okay, whatever.
It's like, I'm sure that was your childhood, and that's very lovely, but nobody cares in the year 2022, 21, coming on 22.
Yeah, almost 22. Yeah. But yeah, I can see where that would happen. Like, if you could kind of see that with actors too. The famous story with Bob Hoskins when he was cast in Super Mario Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
He had no idea what Super Mario Brothers was, and it wasn't until his kid started playing the game and he saw his kid playing the game, and he's like, "That's what I'm gonna be in."
Oh, yeah. Oh, the other great example of now, would you say? I would say that Bob Hoskins. I hear that Bob Hoskins had to be drunk to do a lot of his stuff on that set.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the other great example of an actor who actually hated a role therein was Orson Welles as Unicron in the Transformers movie, which it's like it tells you just what a consummate professional he was, that he went in there and gave that performance. Not it's like he was asked on a TV show, "Oh, what was this? What was the movie about?" I don't know. It was about one group of robots doing terrible things to another group of robots. I don't know.
Yeah, yes. Well, and to top it all off, he was very sick when he recorded his lines. So
yeah, was that his last movie?
Yeah. And apparently his voice was so weak they had to amplify it.
Mm.
Yeah, so not only did he not care about it either, but he didn't really feel well. So I can kind of understand why he would just be like, I don't care, just let me read the line.
Yeah, it's like if you came to Hollywood thinking I'm going to make my mark on the world, and you get told go make that Micronauts movie, you kind of can see where things like the Last Jedi can happen.
Yeah, because it's and he might claim otherwise, but Rian Johnson clearly hates Star Wars.
At the very least, how to put it, he might think he likes it, but I think he likes it the same way that fan fiction writers like a original series.
Mm.
They see it as like root stock for what they're writing, rather than just a thing in itself to be enjoyed.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course then you add KK into the mix, and
yeah, there was no firm hand at the tiller.
No.
So that's our contractually obligated dig in the Last Jedi for the podcast.
Yes.
I'm being much more sympathetic than I usually am.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We always got to get one reference in there.
Yep. And he did get to make Knives Out, which I didn't really like it, but you know what? It was his movie the way he wanted to make it, and he didn't hurt anybody else. So
yeah.
Godspeed. Go make more.
Yeah. If he wants to make his own stuff, that's fine. Just don't wreck other franchises.
Yeah. So, and I think that's like a interesting thing to. One last discussion point: is it kind of inevitable that a franchise is going to get wrecked? Is there anything that just continues on and on and on and on without getting watered down or ruined in some way?
I it's very hard for me to think of a franchise right now where that hasn't happened.
The only one that comes to mind is Mario, actually, speaking of
Mm.
Mario, because I think this is, we were talking earlier about, so what's the story of Sonic Riders? Oh, well, you see, it's a spin-off racing game where they are on hoverboards, and there are new characters who are a bunch of birds, and they are, they're trying to find out who they are, and Eggman is trying to steal the Chaos Emeralds. Okay, and they resurrect this buried ancient Babylonian style city that their ancestors lived in, uh, and it turns out they're the descendants of genies. Okay, what's the story of Mario Kart 64? Get to the end first and you win.
Yeah.
So it's like Mario, by being simple, manages to avoid a lot of pitfalls of other series.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like cheating because, like, what's canon in Mario? Canon. Miyamoto keeps like when he made the most recent StarCraft, or not StarCraft, the most recent Star Fox game, he was actually like, nah, get some of the story stuff you're trying to do out of there.
Yeah. Yes, story. What?
That gets in the way of the game. We'll
Yeah.
just make it yet another remake of Star Fox
Yeah.
64.
Or, or yeah, or like the Call of Duty franchise where you're just basically it's the copy paste of okay, you're a soldier in a war, and you got a bad guy, and then you got another like secondary bad guy that you thought was a good guy, but they're really a bad guy, and then
And then you get to the end and you win.
yes, yeah,
You shoot them better than they shoot you, and you hit your checkpoint. You watch a cut scene, and you're done.
yes. Yeah, you don't yeah, you do a quick time event where you kill the bad guy, and then you look at his hanging corpse and then smoke a cigar.
Yeah. Uh, And yeah, so now I notice that all of our examples of ones where they pretty successfully keep going at around the same level are video games, which, being interactive media, you can be more bare bones with your story
Hmm.
because the fun of, like what we talked about before, video games are different.
Yes.
But I can't think of any long running franchise where they don't eventually just succumb to gravity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say like again, and then here's my obligatory Star Trek reference. Um, you know, Star Trek had that in the mid 2000s. You know, Nemesis, which came out a couple of years before, was a absolute flop, and then
Got outperformed
Enterprise,
by Made in Manhattan.
yeah. And I got that could be a whole. I could do a whole video about what went wrong with Nemesis, but and then of course then Enterprise, which was the TV show, got canceled after 4 years, and that was largely because and I remember the Star Trek fandom at that time. People were burned out with Star Trek. It got old, and they were just not that interested anymore.
I mean, when you think about it, you had the original series, then you had time to have it in syndication where everybody watched it obsessively.
Hmm.
Then they tried to bring it back as a TV show, and that failed. But they repurposed that to make the motion picture. And then from there on, which that would have been what, 1980, 1979?
Yeah, 79. Yeah.
So from 79 on, you had a new Star Trek thing at least once every 2 to 3 years, and all through the 80s. And then you hit the Next Generation. And from that point, you always had at least one Star Trek TV show on TV.
Yep.
Plus movies, plus a few video games here and there, plus a bunch of books. Like, there was so much Star Trek for you to consume. And even if Enterprise hadn't been kind of a flawed premise to start with, it how much of it was Enterprise not being that great, and how much of it was another Star Trek show?
I would say again a little bit of both. I mean, yeah, the audience just did not really take to Enterprise, and some of that's because it was too much like Next Generation, uh, and because at first, the way they advertised the show was it was supposed to be different from the other Star Trek shows because it was a prequel.
Hmm.
But then it ended up being too much like the other Star Trek shows, like I said, the aforementioned TNG and to a certain extent Voyager.
I recall hearing that Voyager's so like TV shows will have internal episode titles or internal episode designations.
Hmm.
From what I understand, Voyager's episode designations internally were as if it were an eighth season of the Next Generation.
Hmm.
I forget. It's been a while since I heard that, but so take it with a grain of salt. But if it isn't factually true, it's close enough to true.
Yeah, yeah, it's and uh and that's the thing. Like, and they didn't, and I would say too, like I don't know if the other problem I think a lot of people had with Enterprise was they didn't. I don't think they could really get around Archer, the captain.
Kind of
And
insane.
yeah, and I don't know if that was just the way he was written or if that was the way Scott Bakula played him. Um, I think it was just the way he was written because he was supposed to be more like Kirk. And
And to say it
then
just came off as petulant and insane.
yeah, I mean, especially in the well, and the third season, like he really kind of went. He'd go like full Jack Bauer in the third season, just like like good God, man.
Yeah, I seem to recall there was this YouTuber I used to watch called SF Debris, who his nickname for him was Duchess
Just-
because he was just insane and like he was acting like a spoiled royal.
yeah, and well, in the character, I mean, of Archer, I mean, he kind of was royalty because his father built the warp engine that was in the ship or
Hmm.
designed it or something. I can't remember, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
but yeah, but that was I would say that was probably and I would say like the later seasons that show got better, but I think by then it was the damage was already done, and they just and any storylines they came up with and anything they could do with those characters just fell flat.
right. I mean, it's how many shows get to a fourth season for them to start getting good without that
Yeah,
Star Trek name.
yeah, very few. Yeah, it's you got to hit that audience within the they like with me with a TV show. Like if I'm not engaged with it within 2 episodes, I'm out.
I can be even harsher unless I hear something very specific about it. It's like you talk about the 3 episode rule for anime. There are times where I'll give it that extra leeway, but like for a lot of TV shows in general, it's like okay, if I'm not at least marginally interested in the first episode,
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, and I will say that depending on the show, I can be that way too. I'm like, if I hear like some line or if I hear if some character is just really annoying the hell on me, I'm like, all right, I'm out. Yeah.
which is why it's always a dicey proposition to make a character intentionally annoying. But
Mm.
that might actually be a good decent prospect for another podcast, like uh, the problems of character growth.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. All right. All right. So I think we've talked this topic to death. Any parting words, Bobcat?
Come back next week before we continue to talk about that topic because it's a winner.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I think we've got it. Yeah, we got our topic for the next show.
I mean, like we'll talk more about running things into the ground.
Yes, yes. Just beat that dead horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, all
Yeah.
right. So, uh, is anybody watching who has a question?
Oh yes. Yes, questions. I should probably get the clip of the Jeopardy music. Although if I did that, we'd probably get a copyright strike.
Yep.
Have they found a new host yet for that show? Well, they did, but then they canceled them.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
all I can say is I can't wait until Twitter just dies.
Yeah.
Although not before Miss Rena uses it to launch her comic book.
Yes. And launch my next comic book.
Yep.
Yeah.
What if there was what if Twitter had an asshole filter? Like, it's like, the thing you're saying is inflammatory and mean.
Yeah. Well, I could see that being abused pretty easily,
Sure.
like a lot of things on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, not seeing any questions, so I
Yeah.
guess we can call it a week.
Yeah. All right. Well, we want thank you everybody for joining us and watching us. Yeah, and go follow me on Twitter at Daniel_Parker63. DB Fastbinder, is that your
Yep.
Twitter? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So at DB Fastbinder, and so get Magpie Wizard and Second Contact, and if you haven't already, and keep an eye out for my Twitter, as I'm going to be doing some more announcements for Guardian Angel. So yeah. So until then, see you all next time.
Yep. See you later.